Hey guys, okay, so we are going to be starting Unit 9 for Algebra 2. However, first day of Unit 9 is talking about the circle equation, which is a review from geometry. However, at the end of geometry, because of the whole coronavirus and the shutdown, when you were supposed to learn the circle equation was at the very end of the very last unit, which we didn't even get to. So what we're going to do so that we're not completely lost, so we're going to go back to our geometry notes from last year that you probably never even saw. And we are going to do the first 2 days of the circle equation from geometry so that we have some background so that we are not completely lost. And then we will jump into our day one notes of Unit 9, where it was supposed to be review of our circle equation. And hopefully it will be a good review. All right, so these notes are actually from geometry from last year of our last unit. Okay, we're going to skip the warm up because that is geometry and we don't really need to talk about that part of it. All right, so we're going to just jump into the equation of the circle here in this text box. And this is what they call center radius form of the circle equation. All right, so circles are based on two things. Just like lines are based on slope and y-intercept, circles are based on where their center is on a graph, okay, which is always a point, and the length of their radius. And that's why it's called center radius form. Our center is known as h comma k. However, h and k are obviously going to be numbers, and they're going to represent a point on our graph. All right, and whatever the x coordinate of that point of the center is, will go there, and the y coordinate of the center of your circle will go here. Okay, everything else is the structure of every single circle equation when it's in center radius form. So you just have to realize all that other stuff, the parentheses with the x minus, okay, the squared, the plus sign, the parentheses with the y minus, okay, and the squared are all part of the structure of the formula. And so that is just a memorization thing. Okay. The other part is the radius. The length of the radius is just a single number. Okay. Let's say 7. Okay. And that radius goes right here after the equal sign. However, it is also squared. All right. So you basically are looking at everything squared here. Okay. So hopefully that helps and you'll remember it. And we're going to practice it. Embed it into your brain. So in one part A, it says draw a circle with a radius of 4 and a center at -2, -3. So the very first thing we do is we go and we look for the center at -2, -3 down here in the third quadrant, and we put a point. Okay, that's the center of our circle. Now, because the radius is 4, we have to realize we go in 4 in infinitely many directions. However, on a graph, we're not going to go 4 in infinitely many directions because it's going to be extremely hard. Because it's going 4 units diagonally is tough to plot on a graph. So what we're going to do is we're going to go the 4 normal directions, left, right, up, and down, and we're going to plot a point, and then we'll go ahead and connect those 4 points and make the best circle we possibly can. So here we go. We're going to go 4 units up. Okay, that's a point on my circle. 4 units down. That's a point on my circle. 4 units to the right and 4 units to the left. And now we have 4 points on my circle. And now I'm going to go ahead and make the best possible circle I possibly can. Okay. If you have a compass, which is a device used to make perfect circles, you could use that if you wanted to, but you do not have to. All right. So just try to make the best roundest circle going through the 4 points that are on the circle. And part A is fun. Finished. Okay. Fun and finished. Okay. Part B says give 4 points on the circle. We've already plotted them. We just have to state the coordinates. So if we take a look at, let's see, this one here, coordinates of that one are -2, +1. Okay. Next up, if we take a look at this one here, that's at +2, -3. Okay. We'll take a look at this one over here, down here at the bottom, and that is at -2, -7. And our final point over here is at -6, -3. Okay. Next part up, it says write the equation of the circle. And so what I do is I always get the structure of the formula down. All right, so it's a set of parentheses squared plus a set of parentheses squared equals. Okay, this is always a permanent x. This is always a permanent y. Okay, next thing I do is I go and I look at the center. And in my center, that x-coordinate is a -2. And if I go to the formula up here and I put a -2 here, you're going to realize that from the formula, there's a minus sign and you just put another negative, and that a minus a negative is actually a positive. And so this turns into +2. Okay. Same thing for the y-coordinate. If we take the y-coordinate, which is -3, okay, and we put it in for the k, you're going to realize you have a minus from the formula, a negative from your coordinate, and a minus a negative is actually a positive. And so this turns into a +3. And so a little rule of thumb, okay, if you want a little bit of a hint of remembering, okay, that the numbers in here are always the opposite signs because of those negatives from the formula. Okay, so always you're thinking and looking for the opposite signs when you're talking about the center. Okay. All right, so now we are at the after the equal sign part, okay? And that is where the radius is. And since your radius is 4 and you put it into our formula, it's really 4 squared. But we're not going to write 4 squared, we're going to write 16 because that's what 4 squared is. Okay? And there it is. There is the equation of our circle. Okay? So if we were ever given that, we can go ahead and say, hey, the center is the opposite of the numbers I see in there, which is -2 and -3. And here is your radius, but you have to remember that this number has been squared. Okay, that you have to go ahead and take the square root of it, all right? And that's how you get your radius equal to 4, all right? But I will tell you that you never, ever, ever want to actually write that square root in your equation, because if you do and you leave it in there, your equation now becomes wrong, okay? That should be 16 after the equal sign, not the square root of 16. So be careful that you never write that actually in there. You just think it. Okay? All right. Let's go ahead and see what else they have. Number 2. Oops. In number 2, through 6, it says write an equation for the circle satisfying the given conditions. Okay. I'm going to get rid of these lines that I drew in there accidentally. Sorry, guys. Okay. All right. In number 2, it says we have a center at -3, +2, and then a radius of 3. And we don't need the graph for this to write the equation. We have the two things that we need, so we can go ahead and throw them right into the formula. So again, I always get the structure of the equation for the circle formula down. Okay. Remember that this is a permanent x and this is a permanent y. And that remember that there's a minus sign after that x and y. And so remember that that minus sign after the x and the -3 that you're going to put in there is actually going to turn into a +3. Okay. With our next one, when we go ahead and we take 2 and we put it into the parentheses with the y, remember there's a minus after the y, okay? And so that would be a -2. All right, so remember what I said up there. Always think the opposite. So take a look. Opposite of +3 is -3. Opposite of -2 is +2. All right, so that you can get your center out of there and make sure that they're right. So just always think opposite, all right, when you're talking about the center and into the formula or out of the formula, okay? All right, so now we take our radius, which is 3, and don't forget that you have to square it to put it into the formula, and that's going to produce 3 squared, which is 9. And there's the equation of our circle, done. Okay. All right, so in number 3, we got to talk about something. But again, we're going to get the structure of our formula down, but we're going to leave a little room underneath this, okay? That this is a permanent x and this is a permanent y. Okay, and zeros. Well, one thing to talk about zeros is that there is no such thing as the opposite is 0. So we can go ahead and go, that's from the formula, and there's my x coordinate of my center. That's from the formula, and there's my y coordinate from the center. Okay, and then my radius is 6. When I put it in, I have to square it, and so I get 36. Okay, all right, so what's going to happen is that you're never going to see it written like this. Okay, x minus 0. If you take nothing away from x, all you have left is x. And so because that's an x minus 0, we can clean it up a little bit. X minus 0 is x, and then the square is on the outside, so we just end up with x squared. Okay? Plus, same thing happens here. Y minus 0 is just y, and therefore y squared is just y squared. And this would be how they're going to write the equation of a circle anytime that there is your center's at 0, 0, or if there's a 0 involved in your center. Okay, both don't always have to be zeros to clean it up. All right, number 4, radius is 3.5, center is at 2, 0. So we'll go ahead and say our structure of our formula is going to always look like this. That this is a permanent x and this is a permanent y. And we're going to take my center, okay? +2 is going to become -2. Okay, and because that's a 0, we just talked about that. We can go ahead and put that 0 into it. But really, what is this going to just become? It's just going to become y squared. Okay, y minus 0 is just y and then the squared. And then equals, okay, radius is 3.5, so you might need your calculator to square it. 3.5 squared is 12.25. Done. Okay. Number 5. So be very careful. They give you 2 sets of coordinates. Remember that when you write the equation, it's the center that we need. So we're looking here, and we're going to put in a -2. Here's going to be a -5. Okay. What they didn't give us is they didn't give us a radius. However, they're trying to show us that if you graph the point 2,5 and you graph the point 13,5, which is a little impossible on here because our graph only goes out to 10. So we'll say 11, 12, 13, and up the same amount. Okay. That if this is our center and this is a point on my circle, that my circle is going to something look like this. Okay. And by thinking about that visual, this right here is our radius. Okay. Because it's a horizontal line, we can count blocks. Okay. So if you think about that, you're here at 2 and here at 13, 2 to 13 or 13 to 2, okay, is a length of 11. And now that we know our radius is 11, we can go ahead and square it and put it in the formula as 121. All right, so sometimes they're going to leave parts of that you need to put into your equation. They'll leave that information out. We just have to be smart enough in how to find it. All right, and if that means that we need to think using a graph so that we can see the picture a little bit better, then we're going to have to use the graph. All right, hopefully that helps, and we'll do a little bit more on the back side of notes.